Choose FI, episode 14. The Phases of FI with Mr. 1500.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Hey, welcome back to the studio. I'm here today with Brad. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Jonathan. How's it going?
Very, very good. Also today, we're going to be bringing in Mr. 1500. He is very, very cool. Going to be doing a lot of cool things. He's been documenting his journey to financial independence, and I think he's almost there. So we've got him in the studio today, and we're really excited to talk to him a little bit about the phases of FI and also his own personal philosophy on money. I think it's going to be very valuable just for you when you're building your own personal money philosophy and you're trying to decide what do these distinct phases of financial independence actually look like. So, Carl, welcome to the studio today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a big honor to be on with my old friend, Brad. Brad and I go way back in internet years. I think I met Brad like 3 years ago at a Fincon conference, so it's super cool to be talking to him again and my new friend, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm glad to be included.
Yeah, we're psyched to have you here. Yeah, we've met up, I guess, now 3 straight years of FinCon, and yeah, it's always, that's the one of the highlights of my year. So yeah, it's always good to see you and Mrs. 1500 and the rest of our group of friends there.
It amazes me, you got this huge, global world out there and people that live in just, every single different state. And in some cases in different countries that are talking about personal finance and just how small that community, actually really is. And you know each other, you go to conferences with each other, you collaborate with each other on different products. It's really cool. I mean, it's kind of inspirational just to some degree as well.
Yeah, and I think the most amazing thing about it is I consider myself a pretty deep introvert. Meeting new people makes me uncomfortable. But when I go to a place like FinCon or meet someone like Brad, I've already read a little bit about him, and I know he's going to be a lot like me. If you've got money in common, you've got all these other things in common. So I always find it how strange it is that I'm so comfortable around these people like 5 minutes after meeting them, which never happens. Usually takes me like 2 years to warm up to someone in real life. But yeah, it's a very cool community. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I know exactly what you're saying. I think what it is when you meet someone just on the street or you meet a neighbor or you move to a new neighborhood and you're trying to figure out what is it that I have in common? Because you can't really talk about this stuff with your neighbor right out the gate. If you do, you're that weird guy, and it's probably not even appropriate. But especially if they're got the $60,000 car and you're driving your 10-year-old beater and it's just a conflict of values, but you find someone that, comes from that same personal philosophy of money and you immediately have that baseline, you can build a real relationship on that. I think there really is something there.
Yeah. And once you have money in common, you find out you have all these other things in common, like my friends who like the blog and are financially independent and like all this stuff, also like board games. They like to be outside.
I love board games.
They like to, yeah. See it right there.
I know. I'm in it. I'm in the club.
Yeah, you should see his cabinet over here. He has about 100 different board games. It's amazing.
There's nothing frugal about that board game collection.
But it's awesome.
It is awesome. That's actually one of the things we wanted to talk today about was just kind of discussing your personal philosophy on money. And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about that with you is because you have essentially what we like to refer to as a pillar post where you've really kind of thought through this aspect at a very deep level. And I know there's a lot of people that have appreciated your insight. So I was hoping maybe you could just, unpack that for us just a little bit today.
Yeah. So not a long time ago, but about a year ago, I was being interviewed for a different podcast, and the interviewer had sent me the questions ahead of time, and most of them were pretty easy softball ones. But then I get to the last one, and it said, "What is your philosophy about money?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I have no idea." And I sat and thought about it for weeks on end, and I couldn't come up with an answer to this. I'm like, "Why is this so difficult? My whole blog is supposed to be about money, and I can't come up with any philosophy about money." And then it hit me one day that the whole thing isn't really about money. It's about living the right way, and money is just a facilitator to that. So the true goal, the end goal of this whole journey isn't actually money. You think it is. We all have these financial goals. Oh, I'm going to get $1 million or whatever your number is, but that's just a stepping stone to a better life. It's just a tool that we use to do what we really want to do and to free ourselves to be able to pursue our passions. So it's not really about money. It's about life. So my philosophy about money is just the facilitator. It's only a tool to help you live how you really want to live.
That's cool. That's totally cool. And I think we were at a camp recently in Southeast Florida, the Southeast Mustache Camp, and JD Roth was there, and he was giving a talk on creating a personal mission statement. And he incorporated some of those same thoughts as well, in that money makes a really horrible goal. It's a nice, benchmark to let you know you're reaching your goal, but it shouldn't be that ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And a lot of us don't realize it. It seems obvious, but yeah, money is not the goal. We put money on this huge pillar, and we set these goals, and we run towards them. But once we get to them, there has to be something after that. Money isn't the final goal. It's just a part of it.
Do you want to walk us through what some of your goals are?
Yeah, I should back up a second. So my original goal when I started the blog was to have $1 million and no debt. And I was my living situation was in flux at that time. We were in an expensive house, and we were silly for buying that, so we knew we had to get out of that. So what we eventually did is downsize to a smaller, more reasonable house. So my goal kind of changed at that time. I like low interest rates. So I decided not to have no debt. I decided to keep my mortgage debt and just have $1 million and then enough money to cover the mortgage. And that was my compromise, to have enough cash. So at that time, I needed $120,000 to cover my mortgage. So my goal became to have $1,120,000. And yeah, we've had a very strong market at our back recently. So I'm up to about $1.7 million now. And I met my goal last year. Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Very nice.
Thank you. I'm thankful every single day for it.
So Carl, that's 4 years. I'm at your blog in the sidebar now. So when you started the blog, I guess on January 1st, 2013, your net worth was just south of 600K. Is that right?
Yeah. And at that time, that was only my portfolio. I wasn't counting the $150,000 I had in home equity. We had just bought that fancy house a short time before that. So my net worth was around 725 back then.
Gotcha. So the story of the house, I've always found fascinating. Would you mind just telling the audience just a little bit about what went on with that the big house that you guys kind of sold in a rush?
Yeah. Well, there were a couple of them. We did a fix and flip in Wisconsin, and that was on a lake. It was a fancy house, but we thought we'd be able to make a bunch of money from it. So we bought that one in 2006, and we know what happened right after that. The markets crashed worldwide, and the luxury market really took a hit. So after years of hard work, we sold that one and probably broke even on it. I fully admit that I'm too scared to look at the numbers. And I don't consider that a mistake, because we were more a victim of the timing. We didn't know the world was about to collapse. But then after that, and I think this is what you may be referring to, Brad, we moved out to Colorado, and we bought this big cookie cutter house in this newer subdivision. The house was almost 5,000 square feet. And yeah, it was ridiculous. We had 4 bathrooms, like 5 bedrooms in this place. And then we were going to finish off the basement to make even more space. So we kind of lost our way and bought this big house. And this big house turned into a disaster for us. I remember we were standing there about a week after we moved in, and our older daughter was like 5 at the time. And some other kid walks up to her and goes, "How many American Girl dolls do you have?" And my daughter had no idea what that was, so she kind of just shrugged. And this other girl said, "How many American Girl dolls do you have?" My daughter's like, "Oh, I guess I don't have any of those. I have other dolls." And this other girl kind of made a disgusted sound and walked away. I'm like, oh my God, I can't bring my kids up in this neighborhood. This is terrible. This kid's like 5 and already judging my daughter because she doesn't have the right kind of doll.
Living next to the Joneses can be very expensive.
Yeah, it was at that time I discovered Mr. Money Mustache, and I thought, what are we doing? We've got this big, expensive house, and we're living around people who don't share our values. We must get out of here. And we put a for sale sign in our front yard 2 weeks after we moved there.
2 weeks. That's amazing. So, I mean, you guys obviously knew instantly. So, I mean, was it literally that comment about the American Girl, the $100 American Girl dolls?
It was some of that. We noticed it wasn't super outright, but we kind of noticed that others were judgy of us. We have like a 2003 Honda Element, which is a nice car, but these people who lived across the street from us, their twins had just gotten driver's license and they got like matching new Camaros. And then like 2 weeks later, we smashed it. And then their parents went out and bought them a new one. So all the high school kids had better cars than us. And, I felt extremely uncomfortable. I didn't think we'd ever fit in. And we made efforts to. We walked around and, hey, we made some cookies for you and all that. Yeah, I could tell people just kind of looked down at us. So it wasn't for us. And I could have probably stuck it out, although I wouldn't have been happy. But there was no way I would want to raise my children around that materialism. Just, no thank you.
So, I think a lot of the pursuit of FI comes down to psychology. And I definitely want to talk to you about that more in this podcast. But, you and Mrs. 1500 are both, I've met you both numerous times. You're really smart people. Like, I'd love to hear about the psychology of moving into that house, if you don't mind. What were you guys, literally, what were you thinking? Like, it's hard to imagine the Carl that we know today doing that, right? Like, what led to that?
Yeah, and I think back to it too. I'm like, how did we do this? I think part of it, maybe some of it was a reaction because we had just spent all those years remodeling our other house and getting just about nothing out of it. So maybe some of it was a reaction to that, wanting a house that was kind of done. And yeah, another part of it might have just been desperation. We had been looking for a long time for a house in this area. And I kind of remember having ominous feelings about it when we made the offer. I'm just like, forget it. I think we'll eventually grow to like it. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you on that one. It wasn't a wise move. It was a beautiful area. We're up on top of a hill and we could see everything. You could see the Rocky Mountains in Denver. So I'm not sure what got us there. I would never do it again, knowing now, if I knew then what I knew now, I would never do that again. But yeah, I guess I temporarily lost my mind. I should tell you about the story of the blog a little bit. So shortly after we bought that new house, I had an epiphany, I guess, where I had a bad day at work. And up until that time, I would just plan to be like everyone else, work until I'm 62 or 65, and then take my Social Security, move down to Florida, and die. And then I had this bad day at work, and I Googled something like, how do I retire early? Or I don't want to work till I'm 62 or 65. And the Mr. Money Mustache blog came up. And he showed me something that had never occurred to me before. And that one thing was that you don't actually have to work until you're 62 or 65 if you save your money and don't live like a crazy person. Luckily, despite that house, we had been savers at that time. I had over $500,000 saved up. We had maxed out our 401k most of the time, not all the time, which was a mistake, but we had been savers, so we weren't too far from where we needed to be. And so right after, I remember the day I read this, it was like the middle of October in 2012. I did the numbers really quick. I thought, if we can live on $40,000 a year easy, Mr. Money Mustache talks about the 4% rule. If we save up $1 million, we can retire. So the first thing I did was run down and tell my wife about this. Like, hey, look at this. I found, I'm having all this stress at work. It's incredible. And if we just save up all this money, we can retire like in 4 years, I think. And that's where the 1,500 days came from, by the way. So she's like, oh, okay, that sounds good. I'm on board with that. So that kind of surprised me.
So essentially you were saying from the net worth that we're at now, 1,500 days, we can achieve what we need to have the 4% withdrawal rate and essentially be financially independent.
Yep, exactly. And then I told her one other thing, which she was not happy about. I'm like, yeah, and then I discovered this Mr. Money Mustache blog, and I'd like to start a blog too, and we could write about this. And she's like, oh, that's a horrible idea. So it always cracks me up that she thought my crazy out of the ordinary idea to retire when I was like 43. But she was fine with that right from the start, didn't question it whatsoever. But then the idea to write about it online was horrible. She's like, you're insane. You're going to run out of things to write about.
I've seen your draft folder in your WordPress site. I mean, you have hundreds of drafts, right? So I don't think you're going to run out of articles anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm going to click on it now since I'm in front of my computer just to tell you what it is, but I think it's like 400 now. And
you have 400 drafts?
He
Yeah,
is
they're
the
all
most
in various
prolific person
stages.
I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'm
Oh
pretty
my
prolific.
goodness. What's your
Okay,
publish rate? How often are you putting a new article out there?
2 or 3 days ago. Oh, I've called it recently. I have 278 right now.
What restraint? That's amazing. Okay.
In all honesty, most of those will never see the light of day. So,
Well, I tell you what. So these are some things that I just culled from one of the articles that you wrote talking about your goals. And maybe I can just get your thoughts on these, see how this kind of lines up with where you're at currently. And I thought this was really cool because it lines up a little bit with how, with what I view it to some degree, some of my goals. Keep my body in optimum form. Without health, nothing else matters.
yeah. So, I was at we go to the Berkshire Hathaway conference every year, which is Warren Buffett's holding company. And, I'll never forget this. One time, you can ask him questions. So this guy he was in his 20s, gets up to ask Warren Buffett a question. And he said, Warren, which books would you recommend? What top 10 books? And Warren Buffett was like, yeah, I'd recommend this book and this book and this book. And then Warren Buffett's like, and he went off on this tangent. And I don't remember how exactly this happened. But what he ended up saying is, I would trade my entire net worth. I'd give you my entire net worth right now to be your age. And that just stuck with me. If you don't have health, you don't have anything. Everything else is useless if you're not healthy. So
yeah, to be 25 with the resources you have now, or to be 95 years old and be a billionaire, which one would you choose? I think it's a pretty easy choice.
Absolutely.
Surrounding yourself with the best people that you can, being around people who challenge you, make you a better person.
Yeah, I think the people who are around us define us. I think I've told Brad this before. I'm like, if I could design my neighborhood, I would make Brad and all my Fincon buddies move to my town, or we'd all buy a town and live by each other, because the people who are around you kind of define you, and they lift you up, and they kind of define how you live your life too. So are you going to be spending $1,000 on the weekend to go on a fancy ski trip, or are you going to be happy playing board games and maybe sitting in front of the campfire in someone's backyard, enjoying each other's company?
That sounds awesome. And especially with people who have a fair amount of free time because they're not having to go work to pay for their couch payment.
Yeah, it makes it all that much more important. Definitely.
Yeah, that community, Carl, is a dream of mine. We were just down at Camp Mustache in Florida, and I was actually speaking with Pete about it. And I desperately want him to build a mustachian community. And that's, whether it comes to pass or not, I mean, it would be so neat to have a group of like-minded people. And, again, this comes back to the psychology of what our lives are like and what we benefit, what we value, I guess, is the way to say it, and to me, sitting there with a craft brew around a campfire, like you're talking about, or playing Ticket to Ride, or some type of board game. I mean, that's a dream existence for me. And actually, connecting with people, as opposed to just the superficial garbage that most people go through life dealing with as their friends or acquaintances. Yeah,
Brad, and I remember one of your you did something for my blog one time, and you had that picture of the North Shore of Kauai. So I think we should all pool our money together, buy a couple acres, and build a compound there.
Nice.
There are more people talking about that than you think.
I would love to do it.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful having similar people around. Like in our example, we happen to live in Longmont, which is the home of Mr. Money Mustache, and there's lots of people like him around, and some of them we're fortunate to call our friends. So if we need someone to watch our kid, hey, where you've got something to do, how about we trade babysitting, or hey, let's play Ticket to Ride tonight, or I don't know. It's very pleasant being around people.
And that ties into one of your other goals. And you said, live in a place that has this great sense of community, access to outdoor pursuits, and good resources. And then you specifically mentioned Hello Library. Is that a life hack there?
When I'm looking for a new town, the first thing I do is go to the library. And that, Brad, going back to your question about buying that silly house that I bought, that should have been one of the first indicators, because I went to the library and the town was about 100,000 people. And they had this little tiny, horrible library. So I'm like, what's going on here? So I Googled it, and I learned that the town had voted a library down 3 times. They refused to pay for it. So I emailed the mayor, and he's like, yeah, we hope to get one built one day. And this county, it was Douglas County, Colorado. It was the richest county west of the Mississippi, richer than any place in California. Right. I think the average income there was almost $100,000 a year. But they refused to pay for their library. I'm like, oh my God, this should be one of the pillars of your community. So yeah, as far as a life hack, if you're looking for a town, try to see what their priorities are. Look at their open space, look at their library, see what they're spending money on, and see what they're not spending money on.
Yeah, I think the library, that's something I've talked about on my original blog, Richmond Savers. Yeah, I mean, we probably save easily $2,000 a year minimum going to the library. I mean, between all the books that we get for our kids, I mean, we're constantly reading, the four of us. And I couldn't imagine going to Barnes & Noble and buying these books like everybody else. It just seems so needless to me. I really can't comprehend it when, you can literally go online to the website, order up whatever book you want, and they deliver it in our county, at least, to our local library that's a mile down the road. I mean, that it couldn't be more convenient than that.
Yeah, it's just pleasant. Like our family, we probably go there 3 or 4 days a week, and sometimes we go there for the programs they have, or they have computers for the kids, and they have a Lego club just as a community resource. The books are absolutely number one, and we do that too. I've got Tim Ferriss' Tools of Titans in front of me right now that I just checked out. But yeah, it's a good library is an awesome resource. I can't understate that.
And that sounds like that ties into one of your other things, which said, raise your children to be good and hardworking people with strong values, and increase your knowledge every day by reading, thinking, and solving problems.
Oh God, I don't even know where to go on that one. But
you're very deep, Carl.
Very deep.
Yeah, kids are difficult, Brad. I don't know, Jonathan, if you have any kids, but
one on the way. First one.
Oh, congratulations! When's the due date?
April 22nd.
Oh, care to reveal the sex? Do you know this?
Yeah, it's a boy. Very excited.
Okay, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, it's hard. Whenever a kid asks you for something, it's pretty easy to give it to them. It's a lot harder to tell them, okay, when you unload the dishwasher, do your chores and earn some money, you can go out and pay for it. But you have to do that, or else you're going to have a lazy child who's going to feel, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not going to have the right values. They're not going to have the work ethic.
Entitled?
Yeah, entitled. That's it. My parents weren't far from perfect, but they never, ever, ever gave us anything. We had to work for everything. And I didn't like it at the time. You'd see all these high school kids getting cars. And I'm like, well, you want a car, you better get a job. But I appreciate that so much now because it gave me the work ethic and the values needed to be successful.
And then your final two here, explore the world and give back by volunteering.
Yeah. And explore the world is more, that might not be for everyone, but I can't sit still for that long. I've been to 39 of the states, and I'm going to knock a whole bunch more of them out this summer. I just love to travel and see new things. Sitting at home is kind of torture to me. If I work from home, I have to get out of the house and take a walk, but there's so many things to see. And going back to that kid part, it gives them perspective too. If you can show them how other people live, I think that can be wonderful. Maybe in some places of the world that aren't so fortunate. What a wonderful thing to show your kids firsthand. It's one thing to tell them or show them a picture, but if they can go and experience something like that, that's just great, maybe through volunteering. And you don't even have to be exotic about it. Just volunteer a couple of days a year in your community. And the other thing is the volunteer part. I think all of us are so fortunate, especially those of us who have found this path. Like, I never thought growing up that I'd have $1 million. I thought that was some unattainable, ridiculous goal. And I still have to pinch myself every day. It hasn't sunk in. It's crazy. I wear socks with holes in them, and I still have underwear.
Same here, buddy. Same here.
I have underwear that I've had since high school, and I'm 43 now. So those underwear are 25 years old, and they look it too.
On admissions, you wish you could get back. There you go.
But yeah, those of us who are fortunate, and I don't like the word fortunate because our fortune has come through a lot of hard work for most of us.
Right. But fortune, not luck.
Yeah, if you find yourself at a place in life where you've accumulated an amount of money more than you need, I think you ought to, I hate that word too, because you don't really owe anyone anything maybe, but I don't know. We've all had help too. Like I like to say, I made my own.
But you made choices. There were people that were in the exact same position as you and they're paycheck to paycheck, and they could be exactly where you are, but they made a value choice that led them in a different direction. And you you made sacrifices. You had opportunities, but you made different choices. And because of the choices you made, you're in the position you are now.
Yeah. So, and I've had help. Like I didn't get any college help, so I had loans, but without those loans, I wouldn't have been able to go to college. So other things, whether they be government or people, have helped me out. So I think we owe to the world to give back in some way, either our time or our money at some point in life. And I think, society is coming around to that idea too. You hear about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, who have vowed to give almost all their fortune to charity over the course of their lives, which I think is wonderful. And I look forward to doing the same thing. My kids don't know this yet, but I don't really believe in inherited wealth, so they might hate me someday.
That $30 million they thought was coming their way is not anymore.
Yeah, I'll help them, but money has a funny way of ruining people too.
So, Carl, why don't you talk a little bit about what those goals, have in common?
Yeah, the funny thing about all those goals is you'll notice that none of them really involve that much money. If raising good kids doesn't involve money, in fact, the desire to earn money kind of hinder that. If I'm at a job where I work 60 hours a week, those are hours I can't spend with my kids. Volunteering, being outdoors, travel.
That's a great point.
Yeah, none of this stuff requires money. Some of it does a little bit, but there's ways to hack that. See Richmond Savers or Travel Miles 101 for specifics on travel hacking. But
Thank you.
Yeah, all these things. I'm not talking about a new house or new car. I'm talking about things that require more than anything else time. So time is what's critical. It's not really the money. Money is the facilitator, and money helps buy us the time, but it's not the goal. The goal is to have time to pursue these things before I'm old and shriveled up and I can barely take care of myself.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how much you see, even out in the political environment, talking about, a minimum wage and dollars per hour and that sort of thing. And the conversations that we're having are completely trying to separate your time from money. I mean, it's a completely different focus. We're encouraging middle-class America. How can we separate your time from your income? And I think that could potentially be very powerful. And what you're actually trying to do is you're getting to a point where you can hopefully work less, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not work at all. And work is a loaded word. I'm always going to work, but I'm going to work when I want to. I'm going to work on what I want to. And the big thing that separates my definition of work from what a normal person might define work as, my measure of success with work isn't the amount of money I make. It's how much happiness and growth and fulfillment it brings me. It very well might bring me money. Like the blog is a passion project. I did it for 3 years and I made like $200 in the first 3 years, but I genuinely enjoyed it and it gave me other things besides money.
Including some of those contacts, finding people that share those similar interests, which I think has been very fulfilling for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the number one thing I would say.
And Carl, as you move more towards, actual financial independence and, I think you've dialed back your work a little bit, right? Where you have, is it Fridays off?
I now have Fridays and Mondays off. And so Mondays, I work 3 days per week.
Wow. That's cool.
So yeah, I mean, and I struggle with this too, as I move closer to FI. It's, you have 168 hours in a week, right? Obviously you have to sleep, you need to eat, those kind of things, but there's just a ton of time left over. And it's, how do I use that effectively? How do I use it strategically? And I don't mean that in the normal sense, but just doing something of value, doing something I enjoy, spending time with kids, like this is where I'd love to just have a conversation, is like, what have you figured out as you move, now you're in this, 3 day a week work week, what are you spending your time on now that you weren't able to when you were working 5 days a week?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, Brad. But before we go into the 3 day a week work schedule, which is a fairly recent phenomenon, over December, something interesting happened to me, and that is my work computer broke, and it took me an entire month to get a new one. So all of a sudden, I had 4 weeks completely free, and the kids were out of school, so that absorbed some of that time. But yeah, I learned a couple of things from that. Number one is you have to be disciplined. It's easy to go down the internet rabbit hole, and before you know it, 2 hours are gone. But yeah, more importantly, and what you're getting at, Brad, and what I was worried about was if I would have meaningful work to do. You can't just quit your job for the sake of quitting a job. You know what I mean? You always have to have some kind of meaningful work, there comes that word again, to move to. And what I always tell people is you should look at how you spend your weekends, because if you spend your weekends sitting around eating potato chips and laying down on the couch, you probably should never retire, because that's not good activity. If you retire, your free time is going to be an amplification of that, and you're going to die young of a heart attack.
Probably a totally valid point.
Yeah. And I'm a pretty motivated person. I like to keep myself very busy. So,
as you were saying that, I thought to myself, you hear about the midlife crisis, but I feel like you don't really see that in the fire community. And that's because we've been developing all these other passions, this whole time. We've been finding what we're passionate about. And when you hear about the midlife crisis, usually it's the person that their whole life has just been at their job. They've been 100% dedicated to their job this whole time. And now, as that's taking a back seat, they have nothing to fill it with. And I think what you're doing is the opposite of that. You're designing the life that you want now. And then, as work takes more and more of a back seat, you have more time to actually, push forward with that stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the money enables it. So I would say for most of us, we've got all these passions, like for Brad and probably you, Jonathan, you've got all these things you want to do. But if you have to work, if you need the money, then you kind of file them away. But then once that snowball starts accumulating and that money starts building up, you realize, hey, if I left my job, then I could pursue these things. And the mindset kind of starts changing at that point because you can do it. You're not suppressing those thoughts because there's no way you could do it. All of a sudden you realize, wow, I really can take this massive leap. For me, it's a massive leap to completely leave my job. But the money enables that. And I'm not sure where I was going with this, but Jonathan, you were saying?
Are you going to be bored?
No, I'm not going to be bored at all. So what I found in those 4 weeks, and that was always my fear. My worst fear in life is to be bored. I cannot stand being bored. And what I realized during my time off is I would try to be very disciplined. I'd have a big list. I'd have like 15 or 20 things I wanted to accomplish that day. And by the end of the day, I'd have like 7 of them done. And not because I was undisciplined watching YouTube, was just because I would get into one project. I would say, hey, I want to write this post and it's going to take me half an hour. I always write how long I think it'll take me. And like an hour and a half later, I'm still working on it. And I think it needs work. It's such a luxury to have the time, because instead of rushing through these tasks that I would do when I had to work 40 hours a week, I can have this luxury to really do them right. And same thing for working out. I would take, like, when I worked full time, I would take half an hour to work out and get through it as fast as possible because I've got to come home and make dinner. But once you have the luxury of not having to work, you can spend 2 hours on your workout and warm up with a mile or two run, and then do my weights for an hour and then run a little bit more after that if I still have any energy. And it's cool. Completely wonderful. So what I found is my projects that I have expanded to fill my time. And now I think I need more time too. This 3-day-a-week stuff is not enough. So I found that out very quickly, and I was pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah. So, you have an article where you basically go through the phases of FI, and, essentially you're approaching the end of phase 3, and now you're going into this phase 4. So, and I think what were your phases called, just for our audience? Phase 1, I think, was normal life, which is where probably most of us are. And then phase 2, running to a big pile of money. So you kind of have this plan where you just need to acquire enough so you can do that, 4% safe withdrawal rate. And then phase 3 is now approaching FI or getting close to it?
Yeah. In phase 1, I show a picture of that fancy house. If you've got that picture, that was my mistake. So in that period, it was just my normal life with normal expectations. I worked till I'm 65. No matter what happens, I just had no idea and had never the thought of retiring early.
Is that the McMansion?
Yeah, that's it. That's my mistake.
Is that the Starry Night picture in the background I see?
Yeah, that's actually the Madison, Wisconsin skyline painted to look like Van Gogh. Uh-huh. So, and then phase 2, it was just, that's when I discovered Mr. Money Mustache after my bad day at work. And I realized, hey, I'm running to this big pile of money, but I had never considered what happens after that. And eventually it occurred to me that I have to figure this out. Like, you can't just quit for the sake of quitting. That would be the most ridiculous mistake in the world. So, and that kind of terrorized me for about a year. I'm like, geez, I write this whole blog about financial independence, and I have no idea what's going to happen after I hit financial independence, and I had already decided, like, if I can't figure this out, I can't quit my job. I have to stay working if I don't have meaningful activity.
And that decision, that sounds like that is phase 3. So figuring out what that decision is.
Yeah. And that decision was, and the Internet Retirement Police will call me out, but, I really enjoy coding, and I've been talking to different people about different computer projects that I'm working on now, actually. So I'm going to continue to code and work on these projects, and they might make money, but they might not. And like I said before, my definition of work doesn't have to be how much money I made. I don't have to validate my job by a paycheck, which is wonderful when you're just doing it for personal growth and for enjoyment.
Very cool. And then,
and it also doesn't mean that you can't earn money. I think, like you said, the internet retirement police, I think people get bogged down in that. Oh, you're quote unquote retired, but you're still earning money. I mean, I think that's kind of losing the forest for the trees. It's,
well, and that's why I like financial independence, that phrasing, so much more than retirement. I mean, I think that is the problem. Retirement does seem like that is something where it's done, where financial independence is just a framework that you're working from.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I hate the word retired, but yeah, back to where Brad said, you can work for a paycheck, or you can work for yourself, where your paycheck is your happiness and your fulfillment and growth. And that might happen to make money too. That's not the primary goal, but I always tell people this: if you find a $100 bill on the ground, are you going to leave it there? No, you're going to pick it up, of course, try to return it. But then if it's no one's, then it's yours. You're not going to leave money there just for the sake of it. So if your passion happens to generate income, your passion might be woodworking or writing code like me, or writing a book. If that passion happens to generate income, that's wonderful. It's a good side effect, and perhaps you use that income to make some kind of positive difference in the world. But when the income isn't the primary goal, it completely redefines work, and it makes it better. It's funny how many, like the blog, I never did it. I never thought about making money when I started it, and now it actually does make money, but it was never the goal. It's funny how things work out that way. When you work at your passions, you happen to make money as a side effect when you don't even try. And I think it's kind of because we do our best work when our goal isn't money. If we're doing something we really enjoy, we're going to do something very well. So,
well, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read this kind of final paragraph on your article, because I thought it was kind of a good summary of where you were going with this. Basically, you said, one thing that I'm sure of is that I can't be the person I want to be with a full-time job. There's too much that I want to do, and I don't have enough time. I want to be a good dad. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to devour words for 3 hours a day and write them for another 3. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it all goes back to having that luxury time. I'm so thankful that I'm able to have that soon. It's incredible, really.
Yeah, when you read that paragraph, it kind of makes me think of people ask, oh, aren't you going to be bored in retirement, right? And that just is such a ludicrous statement. I mean, you literally have, especially when you have financial resources, you have the whole world in front of you. You can literally do whatever you want, right? How could you possibly be bored? That has always just struck me as like such, just missing it entirely, missing the entire essence of life. It's you can do whatever you want. Literally, you could learn anything. Go for it, right? Like, I mean, how empowering is that? That to me that is the goal. And I love seeing you, reading for 3 hours a day, writing for another 3. Like, I mean, that's pretty valuable time spent, in my opinion.
And I can identify with that. I find the same thing when I'm writing. Even though I don't particularly enjoy writing, I would much rather just do a podcast all day long. Even though I don't particularly enjoy writing, I get excited when I'm actually doing it. And time flies. I mean, it's just fun. And then especially if someone finds your content to be helpful, if they relate to it in some way, and then, contact you about it or say, hey, this impressed me, or this was helpful for me. That is just, it's a great feeling that you just want to replicate, and you do that by doing more of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my best moments for the blog, I don't get them often, but I've had people tell me, hey, I found this post and I realized I was on the wrong path, and I've changed the course of my life. I've decided to change my whole direction. That's incredible to read something like that.
You can't replicate that feeling. That will make your day for sure.
Yeah, so. Make my month. It's awesome.
All right, fair enough. Well, that was awesome. So, the next thing we're going to do, lucky you are going to get to do our hot seat today.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Carl. Well, first question, favorite blog that's not your own?
Yeah, a lot of people are going to say this, but I have to go with the old standard. Mr. Money Mustache, he was a blog that set me free and caused me to reconsider my entire life. So
No, it's powerful. I think one of us went with that one too. We answered these questions a couple weeks back. So absolutely, it's a fantastic blog. And maybe along those same lines, question number 2, maybe almost too easy. Favorite article of all time?
Yeah, and as you hinted at, it is the same blog, the Mr. Money Mustache. I really liked his article. It's called The Practical Benefits of Outrageous Optimism. And that one really resonated with me because by nature, I'm not an optimistic person, but I realized after reading that post how stupid it is not to be optimistic. Most of the stuff I end up worrying about never comes to happen. So from that post, I realized that I should try to control only what I can't control and not worry about anything else, and to try to be optimistic. It's a constant daily struggle for me, but there's really a lot of value in being optimistic instead of pessimistic.
That's awesome. That actually was not the one I was expecting you to go with. And it's amazing how different things resonate with different people. I've read that one before, but I think I'm going to go back and reread it. And we'll link to that one in the show notes as well. But awesome. Very cool. Question number 3, your favorite life hack.
Yeah, so I was listening to a Tim Ferriss interview recently, and he was interviewing this Navy SEAL guy. I think his name is Jocko Willink. And he said something on the podcast. I think Tim Ferriss asked him what the most important thing is, and he said something like, discipline is power. It was 3 words. But
discipline equals freedom.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. I'm
Jocko
so glad
has a great podcast, by the way, Carl. You would love it.
Yeah, okay. I have not checked that one out. But yeah, and that's so true, because if you're disciplined and can get through a day and stick to your goals, you're going to accomplish great things. I see people who fail in life, and it's mostly because they're not disciplined. They go down these rabbit holes of YouTube or looking at their phone constantly. If you can train your mind to do your work and to do deep work when you want to, it's very powerful and very liberating. You can do anything you want if you can train your mind to be disciplined and to stay on task.
That is super cool. And I can identify with that. When there are aspects of my life when I've applied just pure discipline to it, the results are always amplified. Absolutely.
Yeah, and to just build on that, one other thing, so to get discipline in my own life, I try to, every night before I go to bed, I write down what I want to accomplish tomorrow. I try to estimate how much time it'll take. And I even plan what time of the day I want to do it at. For example, I've realized I can't do a big weight exercise first thing in the morning. I just don't have the energy. So on a day off, I plan my weight exercise for the afternoon. But I can write in the morning, so I try to do that. So plan your day and stick to it.
Very cool. Number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
Yeah, there could be a lot of them. I've mentioned my house on the lake, which I bought, and I worked at that for years and made no money from it. But that was more of a result of the economy. It wasn't necessarily a mistake. Mm-hmm. We bought that in 2006. The economy crashed. So I'm not going to call that a mistake. I'm going to call that bad timing. You know, I would say it'd be buying a new car. In 2003, we bought our Honda Element, which we still have to this day, but that thing set us back about $20,000. And I look at financial calculators now, and if I would have just invested this in an S&P 500 index fund, that would be worth over $50,000 now.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Think of what's happened since 2003. We've had the big terrorist attack. We've had the biggest recession since the Great Depression. So all these terrible financial events, yet that money would be worth 2.5 times what it is now. So the orange box that sits in my driveway is my financial mistake.
Okay, very cool. I had a car as one of my financial mistakes too, but that's not the worst financial mistake. So I think you're doing all right. Let's see. So number 5, the advice you would give to your younger self.
Yeah, so I've always been a pretty good saver my whole life, but not quite enough. I didn't max out my 401k every year. I freaked out when the recession happened in 2008, 2009. If I would have maxed out my money the whole time, I would have had a lot more than I do now. And I'm not complaining. I've got $1.7 million. I'm very fortunate. I'm thrilled with where I am in life, but it could have been even more. So if I could go back in time and tell myself that, I would say max it out, dummy.
That's great advice. Yeah, I have similar advice to the world as well. I wish I could go back and kind of do some things over again. But, you know, it's when you're in a fortunate position. Currently, it's hard to say, oh, my life, you know, I made mistakes. But yeah, in a perfect world, you wish you could go back to when you were 20 and tell yourself all these things you know now, right?
Yep, exactly. And that's my easy answer. So I'm going to give you a more difficult one, more esoteric one. And let me give you the backstory really quick. So about a month ago, Mindy and I, that's Mrs. 1500, were invited to go speak at Colorado State University about financial stuff. And I kept on going and over in my head, what should I tell these kids? Because it's easy to show them the numbers. And I think that stuff is kind of boring. You know, you can show people financial calculators and show them how much they'll get if they start saving now. And all that stuff is very powerful. But I started thinking, like, what more can I tell them? And what I came to was this. And this is going to be part 3 of what I tell them. So there's all these expectations that people have of us. So I remember when I was in college, my mom was always harping on me about when I was going to get a girlfriend. And then when I got one, it was the next question was, when are you going to get married? And then after that, when are you going to have kids? And I remember at work, I had this crazy boss who kept on asking me when I was going to upgrade my starter home. And then I had some old piece of crap car, and she's like, oh, Carl, you have to get a nicer car. You're never going to get married unless you get a nicer car. She actually told me that. She just bought a new BMW. So she's like, Carl, you have to show girls that you have money, and unless you do that, you're never going to get married. So I started thinking about this and what I'm going to tell these kids at CSU, and it's this. Like, everyone has all these expectations of you. Society does, your parents do, your neighbors do, but you should try to be your own person, live your own life. The thing that makes Mr. Money Mustache great is he thinks different, and he doesn't care what society thinks he should do. And that's about saving money, about his job, about working on his house. He makes his own decisions and thinks creatively. So people are selfish. We think everyone really cares about what we're doing, but they really don't. Wait But Why has an awesome post on this. Google Wait But Why Mammoth and you'll find it. No one cares deep down inside what you do. So what I'm going to tell these kids is don't listen to other people who try to tell you how to live your life. Everyone's going to have advice for you and think they knows what's best for you. But, you know, conventional wisdom is for conventional people. If you want to live an extraordinary life, you're not going to do it by following the crowd. You're going to do it by being your own person and being a leader. Just because something's been done this way, and just because your neighbors or whatever tell you have to do this and that, doesn't mean you have to do the same. Be your own person. That's how you're going to be great, and that's how you're going to be truly happy in life. So that's what I'm going to tell the CSU students, and they better appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That will be fantastic. I hope that they actually, take away from that, different things, different actionable tips that they can implement in their own life. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us today, Carl.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to have some audience members that are going to want to find out more about the work you're doing. Can you tell our audience how they can reach out and make contact with you, or how they can get integrated into your community?
Yeah, they can visit me at the blog at 1500 days. That's just the number 1500days.com. And you can reach me if you send me an email there. I'll reply to it, or follow me on Twitter at retireit1500.
Very cool. All right. Well, this was absolutely fantastic. Carl, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast today. We got a lot of really good information out of this. To our audience out there, if you're listening to today, hearing this for the first time, some of this was a little bit of philosophy. Some of this was a framework, a way of thinking, both about money and goals and financial independence. If you're trying to figure out, what part of this can I use? What part of this can I take? I think it's really important. The big thing that I came away with is, time is the most precious resource that you have, and figure out what your goals really are. Why are you going to work every day? Is it just so you can keep going to work every day so you can pay for your $200 a month cable package and your subscription services? Or are you trying to go to work to buy yourself freedom? That's what we're trying to do. And if you don't have any friends that are in this space and you feel like you're in it alone, stop being alone. Go find people that share your interest. Come online, go to choosefi.com, go check out Mr. 1500. You need to realize that there are people that are doing something different. You don't have to be broke and trapped. There's another way to go. So we hope that this opened up your eyes, that you're considering some of the things that we're talking about, and you're looking at how you can free yourself from the hamster wheel. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.
Hey, just as a side note, if you want to access the show notes from today's episode, you can go to choosefi.com/014. The amount of traffic to our site and to iTunes and to our podcast has just exploded over the last couple of weeks. We appreciate those of you that have, are checking us out for the first time. We hope that you're finding this information valuable and helpful for your life. We realize that time is your most precious resource. And so if you're giving us even a small portion of that, we hope that we are repaying you by providing value. If you are finding value in this show, we would so appreciate it if you would take the time to go onto iTunes, search for Choose FI, and once you've selected it, go to ratings and reviews, and leave us an honest review. Hopefully you can leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.